Hello everybody, welcome to this special edition of The Verdict as we look back at what happened at Keeneland over the weekend at the Breeders' Cup, the World Thoroughbred Championships taking place on their dirt and turf tracks, and we saw some tremendous action. We'll get to Flightline at the end of the show. Quite simply the best dirt horse I think we have seen in a very, very long time, and his performance was scintillating. That's to come, but we are going to start on the Friday. And we're going to start on the turf with a winner for the Aidan O'Brien team. Ryan Moore on board. They had a fantastic Breeders' Cup. And this Juvenile fillies on the turf over a mile went to Meditate. 15-8 she was. Free Look was 7-1. Pleasant Passage 7-1. 8-1. Zigera Delight 9-1. And it was 10s and bigger the rest. Let's have a look and see what happened out there on the Keeneland track. The first thing to say was that the turf was firm, but they were getting a bit of assistance from it, and it enabled them to finish off quickly and let themselves down. And what we saw was some fast winning times and some strongly run races. Stall 10 for Meditate. Pleasant Passage from stall 5 was in second place, and Cairo Consort from stall 2 rounded out third spot. Right, so let's send them on the way and see how this race unfolded. Yet another brilliant ride from Ryan Moore in a strongly run race. Now, we got the early calls and they were 23 flat for the first quarter mile. That is pretty quick on the turf, going round a bend early on, remember, and then 47.3. This was a strongly run turf event by Juvenile standards, and Ryan Moore sensibly didn't want any part of the early pace. He was happy to sit in rear. He's a good 6 or 7, maybe a little bit more off the pace. This filly quickens up in tremendous style. She is a filly who relishes fast ground. She's been ploughing through the mud of late in Ireland, running really well, but her wins have come and her best performances have come when she hears her hooves rattle. This her 5th win from 7 starts this season, 4 of those coming on good to firm ground. And this was her first run at a mile, and it really suited her. Watch the way that she comes home very strongly through this. Final quarter mile pace is the most important thing on the turf. Early pace on the dirt is the most important thing. We'll highlight that a little bit later on in the show. But here's Ryan looking for a smooth passage, and he's coming right round the outside now. He's given away a little bit of ground in coming wide, but if he'd been stuck in here, he might have struggled for running room. He might not have got through. So he's gone wide to ensure that he gets a run. And that was something of a theme on the turf throughout the 2 days. Winners coming 3 or 4 wide off the rail. The same on the dirt as well, where perhaps there was a dead rail. But just look at this filly, stretch clear. She's got her ears pricked in the closing stages. She has won very comfortably indeed. Ryan never using the stick and just nudging her out, hands and heels in the closing stages. That was really impressive in this filly, given that she's given away a load of ground, given that she's had to go 3 or 4 wide turning in, and it's quite a short home stretch, but she quickens up in tremendous fashion. No hard luck stories in behind. Pleasant Passage running well in second place. Cairo Consort from an inside draw was always prominent and went the shortest way round, but none of them could lay a glove on this filly. She's very good indeed. She's about 7-1 for the 1,000 guineas. She gets quick ground at Newmarket. She might give Tahira plenty to think about. She's finished behind that filly, of course, Dermot Weld's filly, before. If she gets quick ground, well, it might be very interesting between the two of them. And 7-1 looks like a decent price. This was a Grade 1. Don't think it was the strongest Grade 1 we've ever seen for juveniles in the Breeders' Cup, but she won as she liked for Ryan Moore and Aidan O'Brien. She'll go into winter quarters as a live prospect for that 1,000 guineas. Let's turn our attentions to the dirt, and we'll have a look at the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Mile and half a furlong the trip here. Cave Rock, the long odds on favourite, 9-4 on. Forte 5-1. and it was 8-1 and bigger the rest. First thing to say about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile at Keeneland is that they move the winning post for this race, so it's not in its normal situ opposite the grandstand. They move it up the track so they can just do one lap of the track. So they start about half a furlong further up the track than the winning post is, and they just do one circuit. So they've got a short run in. So the start and the finish in exactly the same place. So a short run in and a short price favourite in Cave Rock, who was fully expected to win here. He came here with a good resume. He had a buyer figure of 104 in his previous start, and many people thought he was a good thing here on the dirt. But he disappoints a little bit, and he disappoints because this was a very strongly run race, and he gets himself involved in an early war up front with Hurricane J. Hurricane J in the purple colours, Cave Rock to the outside at this stage in second place. Listen to the early calls, 22.4. Wow, that is quick over 1.5 miles a furlong for juveniles. They were flying out there, and then they went through in 47 seconds thereafter, taking each other on, going head to head. Now, Cave Rock didn't want to eyeball Hurricane J, so was taken out wide. You can see the distance between the two front runners. He didn't want to get involved in a war, but the times tell us that they went very hard. Forte, meanwhile, is sat in behind. Nice stalking trip. And one of the features of the dirt races at Keeneland over the 2 days was that winners tended to come from off the pace. Speed didn't really carry all the way to the line, bar perhaps Flightline in the Breeders' Cup Classic. That is not a function of how the track was riding. I read that people thought the track was cuppy, the track was deep, and therefore front runners couldn't sustain their pace. That's not the case. All of the races on the dirt were very strongly run. It was a function of pace that the front runners didn't get home. They were basically going too quick out there, and it was setting up for closers. Here comes Forte, round the outside, surging up to Cave Rock, who's on fumes at this stage, head to one side, lugging into the rail. The rail wasn't the place you wanted to be. It was slightly dead for the whole of the meeting, but that wasn't the reason he got beat. You can blame Cave Rock's defeat on Hurricane J, who engaged him in that speed duel early on, and that did for him. Now, the Bayer figure that was recorded by Forte, this is a speed figure published in the Daily Racing Form, was 100, a triple-digit figure for Forte, which is good for a juvenile. But let me remind you that Cave Rock's already run 104 in his career to date. He is better than the Bayer result. He just got pestered early on, and that took the stuffing out of him, and he had nothing left when Forte came calling. 2 wins at Keeneland now for Forte. Clearly likes this track, goes well at Saratoga as well, and it's another top-class individual trained by Todd Pletcher. And he'll be hoping that this horse makes up into a Kentucky Derby horse. I'm sure he will do. Remember, this is 1.5 miles a furlong. He'll stay 10 furlongs all day at Churchill Downs, but don't give up on Cave Rock. I think he is very good as well. Both of them set to go head-to-head in Kentucky. Saturday now and have a look at the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, a race that often throws up a very good horse. Life is Good won it last year, put up the best time performance at Del Mar over the Breeders' Cup last year. It was won by Nick's Go as well a couple of years ago, and he went on to win the Breeders' Cup Classic last year. So it's got a rich history, this race, and Cody's Wish was the 5-2 favourite. Cyberknife 3-1, 130 Gunite, Pipeline 8-1, 9-1 Simplification, 16s, and bigger the rest. And it was Cody's Wish who delivered here from stall number 7, so out a little bit wide. Looking at the back of the stalls here, has beaten Cyberknife, who was wide as well, from stall number 9, and in third place was Slow Down Andy, who jumped from stall 1. Now, we talked about the Juvenile and how fast they went in that race. Well, the early call in the Juvenile, 22-4, they were flying out there, but this race they went even faster, 22-1 for the first quarter mile. They were certainly not hanging about at all. And then they went 45-3. And remember, the Juvenile went 47 seconds. And the pace collapsed in the Juvenile. And guess what? Off those fractions, the pace collapsed here as well. And who picks up the pieces? Tell you what, you're going to have to look towards the back of your telly. Cody's Wish there, way back at this stage, off those furious suicidal fractions that you saw there on the bottom of your screen. And those fractions were set by a fancied horse in Gunite, who's to the outside, number 5, and number 3, Pipeline. Then sat in third is Slow Down Andy. Cyber Knife is in fourth over on the outside. He finishes second in the end. And Cody's Wish now just beginning to make up a little bit of ground. I say again, the track was not deep. Speed was not carrying because they went too fast early on, as evidenced by the sectionals, and that is a theme that ran through the whole meeting. Here comes Cody's Wish, surging round the outside in Godolphin Blue, which is interesting. And this horse has got a pretty easy task now. The pace has collapsed, Gunite's stopping. Cyber Knife, who's a tough hombre, he stays further than this. He's won at 9 furlongs in the past, but he's down against that rail, which I don't think was necessarily the place to be. Slow Down Andy's run a tremendous race in third because he attended that strong pace, but the horse that didn't attend it, the horse that saved energy, sat off the ridiculous fractions early on, came home strongly to land the mile, and there was not a dry eye in the house. It's a very emotional success. Cody Dorman, who has a rare genetic disorder, was there to see Cody's Wish win. This horse named after him, after he went to the stud farm where this horse was born, and he really took a liking to this fella, and thus this horse was called Cody's Wish, and it was a very emotional success with Cody Dorman there. A winner for legendary trainer Bill Mott, one of 2 winners that he had at the Breeders' Cup. He also had the runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Classic, who's going to be a live contender, I think, for the Kentucky Derby. But anyway, this was a good performance from Cody's Wish, who stays on too strongly. See how well strung out they are in the closing stages. Cyberknife battles on really well, but the pace was too strong, and it's set up for a closer. And that closer was Cody's Wish. Maybe Maydan beckons in the Godolphin Blue. Let's turn our attentions back to the turf now and have a look at another winner for Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore in the shape of Tuesday in the fillies and mares. Now this is over a mile, 1.5 furlongs. It was over further last year because of the configuration of the track at Delmar, but back to its normal distance here. And Nashua was 15-8, Tuesday 7-2, and Italian 5-1. Above the curve 13-2, 14s and bigger the rest. It was Tuesday who obliged, the Oaks winner of course. Stall number 5 she's come from. She beats In Italian, done a tremendous race from 11. And Lord Spatespear from stall number 1 was back in 3rd place. This is how this race unfolded, and it was very similar to what we saw from Ryan Moore on Meditate earlier in the show. The fractions here were quicker than those in Meditate's race. Meditate, of course, a 2-year-old, but they went 23 and 47.3. Here, they went 22.4 and 46.1. That's a pretty quick first quarter mile from An Italian, who's in front at this stage under Joel Rosario. They certainly were not hanging around. And here's Ryan Moore, very much the Meditate route, sort of sat mid-div to rear off that strong pace. And he will wait until they turn in before he sets her alight. And it really was a very similar ride to Meditate. No nonsense at all from Ryan Moore. I think the leader has done remarkably well. This is An Italian. She's got claims to be the best 10 furlong mare in America, I think, because she's gone pretty hard in front. She's got to the rail from an outside draw. She's had to work very hard, yet she boxes on very strongly, and Tuesday has to work to get by her. So I think she's a very useful mare. And part of the reason that first call was so quick was because she was working from her outside draw, but nonetheless it was a tremendous performance from her. Let's just put Tuesday's performance into some sort of context. A buyer speed figure of 105. Modern Games won on the card as well for Charlie Appleby and William Buick, recorded a figure of 104. So this was a good performance from Tuesday. It wasn't such a good one from Nashua, and as we stop it there as they turn in, look where Ryan is. It's the meditate route. He's out wide, ready to launch, not getting any trouble in running whatsoever. Holly Doyle, however, if we clear that arrow and pick out Holly, she's the green cap there, trying to come round the outside of Tuesday on Nashua, who'd been a bit keen early on and keen off strong fractions. That's not a good sign. She was using up a lot of petrol, and here, when she's put under pressure, she lugs to her left and she doesn't find the quickening gear that Tuesday's able to find to go and overhaul an Italian. Nonetheless, Nashua sticks on pretty well in the closing stages for 4th place, and Lady Spatespear was back in 3rd. But it was just a superb, no-nonsense ride, this. Ryan Moore, always in the right place, mid-div, no trouble in running, no momentum checked, and Tuesday seemed to relish coming back to this trip and back on faster ground. Plaudits to that man, Ryan Moore. He was brilliant over the weekend. The Breeders' Cup Turf, the penultimate race on Saturday evening, was over a mile and a half, of course, and Nation's Pride was favourite for Charlie Appleby. William Buick's chosen mount, Warlike Goddess, best of the Americans, 7-2. Rebels Romance, James Doyle on board, again for Charlie Appleby, 11-2, 6-1. Mishriff, Broom for Aidan O'Brien, 13-2. Stone Age for Aidan O'Brien, 10-1. Highland Chief, 20. So, at the top of the market, dominated by the Euro Raiders, and indeed, the race, to a degree, dominated by them as well. And it was stall 5 that you've got to keep an eye on. The Godolphin Blue, the white cap, and that is Rebels Romance, who wins the Breeders' Cup Turf on the back of some really good efforts. This horse has improved no end since returning to turf. They tried to turn him into a Dubai World Cup horse, but they returned him to turf, and stepping him up to a mile and a half has really worked for him. Let's just stop it there. Mishriff was up to his old nonsense, missing the break. He's just in there in the maroon colours, and he runs okay. He finishes in 4th place. He wasn't in the best place given how this race was run, and in contrast to all other races on both nights, this was a bit of a crawl. They went quite steady in the early stages, and it meant that William Buick had a bit of a job getting Nation's Pride settled. He's in the all blue there, in the blue cap. He was quite keen through the first 2 calls, which were 24 and 4, so slower than even 12s, and then 49 and 2. So if they were going even 12s, which you'd think they would in the top class mile and a half race, you'd be looking at 48 seconds. But no, 49 and 2. It was a bit of a crawl, and I think it didn't suit Nation's Pride, and I think he's worth another go at a mile and a half. I think the trip will really suit him, but he wanted more of a gallop to go at. I'm also going to mark up Rebels Romance and his performance. Look where he is in the Godolphin Blue and the white cap. Well, he's at a positional disadvantage the way this race was run. There he is, just tucked in towards the rear, white cap, Godolphin Blue. He's only got Mishriff to his outside and then 2 other stragglers behind him. So what he achieves is quite a lot, given that, guess what, Ryan Moore's in the right spot in a steadily run race. Number 3 against the rail, Stone Age. He's in a good spot given how the race was run. Mischief not in a great spot, Rebels Romance not in a great spot either. And this race only really winds up when they turn into the home straight, where Rebels Romance sensibly is brought wide by James Doyle to throw down his challenge. And this reminded me a bit of Yabir last year. Remember Yabir winning this race at Delmar, where they've got a shorter run in, a very short straight. He angled wide and thundered home. Well, this fella does exactly the same thing. Dettori moves on Mishriff now. It looks like James Doyle's going to be stuck. He's going to be held in, but no, he goes with Mishriff, and now he angles wide to come and challenge. Widest of all. Remember Meditate, remember Tuesday. That's where they challenged under Ryan. Well, James Doyle's done just that. Ryan Moore, meanwhile, well, he's here. And he's going to get first jump on Rebels Romance in a steadily run affair. So what Rebels Romance does now to the line is really impressive. It picks up in tremendous style for James Doyle to give James his first Breeders' Cup winner. Here comes Mischief. He was forced very wide as well. He plugs on, one paced really in the latter stages. Down on the inside, number 2, Warlike Goddess. She got a slightly interrupted passage. She went the shortest way round. She was closer to the pace than Rebels Romance, and she just got stopped for half a stride. It didn't cost her victory, but she's the best 1.5 mile horse in America. Make no mistake about that. But this fella, he's developing at a rate of knots, Rebels Romance, and one would have thought, given that he travels well, he's proved that already in his career, that the Shima Classic at Meydan will be very much on the agenda for Rebels Romance. I wouldn't give up on Nation's Pride. I'm sure they'll go again with him next season. They won't go again with Mischief. He has now been retired. He's been to plenty of gigs internationally. He's had the illustrious career. He will race no more. Rebels Romance will. Great stuff from James Doyle. Should you never watch another horse race in your life, you'll be glad that you go out on this one, for this is something very, very special. The Longines Breeders' Cup Classic, Flightline is expected to win on the back of his romp in the Pacific Classic. He was 2-5. Epicenter, perhaps the best 3-year-old in America, 6-1. Life is Good, the mile winner last year, 9-1. Tabar, 10-1. Hot Rod Charlie, a tough old boy he is, 20s. Olympiad for Bill Mott, 40s. Rich Strike, Kentucky Derby winner, 50-1. Happy Saver, 80-1. A deep race, and a race that is one to savour for the ages. Flightline from stall 4 obliges from Olympiad in stall 7, and third home was Tabar from stall number 1. What we witnessed was something quite extraordinary from Flightline. He bolted up in the Pacific Classic, beating the Dubai World Cup winner Country Grammar by miles, and here he wins by 8+ lengths off a ridiculous gallop. Life is Good goes to the front. They want to try and make every yard with him, as they tried to do at Meydan in the Dubai World Cup, where he didn't quite get home. He doesn't get home here either, but it was furiously run. 22-2 and 45-2 the course. Remember, this is 1.25 miles. They are absolutely flying up front, and none of the others can go with them at all. Cody's Wish went 22-1, 45-3. Well, this is 22-2, 45-2, but they're going 2 furlongs further. Flightline, not bothered by the gallop whatsoever, sits in, and basically he's got a world-class horse acting as a pacemaker for him, because Life is Good is one of the best dirt horses we've seen for a number of years. He's perhaps better at 1 mile, but Flightline is toying with him in behind. And I put it to you here that Flightline would have won the mile. He went through the mile quicker than Cody's Wish went over the line. 1:35.33 for Cody's, 1:34.48 for Flightline. He would have beaten Cody's Wish going to the mile pole. Now, Life is Good, not surprised really. He's a spent force off the fractions he went, but Flightline's not. And now he just opens up and clears away. He lugs a bit to his left in the closing stages. Life is Good is done, and the closers come calling. Olympiad for second, Tabar for third, but just watch this horse clear away and record a Bayer speed figure of 121. It's on the back of 126 that he achieved in the Pacific Classic. People thought he might bounce out of that Pacific Classic, for he ran so fast there. Oh, he just did one thing here. He bounced into the winner's enclosure as he liked, running 2 triple-digit Bayer figures over 120. He's almost unheard of, and people have been comparing him to Secretariat, the great Secretariat. He had an advantage over this horse in that he won a Triple Crown, in that he won races that people really take to their imagination, whereas this fella didn't do that. I wouldn't say he's necessary Secretariat, but the old boy would have taken half a turn in his grave when he saw what Flightline did here at Keeneland over the weekend. This is one of the greatest performances you will see from a thoroughbred in your life. Unfortunately, you'll never see him again. He has been retired. That is official, and he will go to stud now. Look at him pulling up. He's pulling up like a fresh horse, having run ridiculous fractions. Bang on 2 minutes was his time. That's the time that top class horses can do over 10 furlongs. He could have run quicker as well. He is an absolute superstar. It was an absolute privilege to work on the show that brought you Flightline. I hope you enjoyed watching it live and you enjoyed reviewing it with me here on The Verdict. The Breeders' Cup itself was a triumph for the Europeans. Every single turf race went to them, headlined of course by Aidan O'Brien and Charlie Appleby. But when it came to the dirt, there's only one horse that we need to talk about. We saw him last, but he is simply the best.